thought more about it, even though I didn't think much of it at the time. In 1964, at the end of March, I received a letter from a prison inmate in Reidsville. And it was a one-page letter. And it was written to me, and it said, "Mr. Moore, please help me. They're going to kill me tomorrow in the state prison. And please help me, yours in Christ, Ernest Whippler." Now, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The execution is scheduled in the morning at 10 o'clock. And so I read the letter, I don't know how many times, trying to figure out whether or not this is an April Fool's joke, if this is for real. So finally I decided that I'd investigate and find out if it were for real. I called the warden, who was a fellow by the name of Ralph Balcom at the time, in Reidsville. And I asked Warden Balcom, I said, "Do you have an inmate there by the name of Ernest Whippler?" He answered in the affirmative, yes. I said, "Is he scheduled to be executed tomorrow?" He answered that in the affirmative, you know. And so then he told me that Ernest had been represented by lawyers in Macon, Georgia, and they had taken his case to the Supreme Court. And he gave me their number, and I called them, and I had a conversation with them. And I was eventually able to put together a petition to the governor to appoint a sanity commission to investigate whether or not Whippler was sane or not. And I knew what the outcome of that would probably be, but I needed time. Because remember, in those days, I don't know if we had expressways completed in Georgia at that time. We had some, but I don't think too many. And the distance between Atlanta and Reidsville is about 335 miles. And the judge in the Southern District of Georgia at that time was a Democrat who had been appointed by President Truman. But he had a very restrictive judicial philosophy when it came to the rights of inmates, particularly if the inmates were Negroes who were claiming constitutional violation. So I knew that he would not be of much help, if any, if I could get to Reidsville. And so I got together my petition to appoint the Sanity Commission, and I contacted the Governor's Council, and the Governor's Council told me to meet him the next morning at 8:30 in his office. And the next morning at 8:30, I was there on time. But the Governor's Council was nowhere in sight. So I was sitting there with my two supporters. Both had psychology degrees, but hadn't practiced psychology. One was a professor at Atlanta University in Morehouse by the name of Mr. Steinmetz. He was a Canadian. And the other one was a provost out at Emory University by the name of Bonnie Strickland. But they were there as my supporters. And so time went by, and about 5 minutes to 10, the Governor's Council came. He says, "Is there a lawyer here for something for the governor?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'm here." And I gave him the petition, and he said, "Wait here." And we waited, but I really didn't wait because I wasn't sure what he was going to do. So as soon as he got out of the room and got a few paces ahead of me, I walked out the room very softly and followed behind him without attracting his attention. And sure enough, he went in the governor's office. And at that time, when you went to the governor's office, there were glass panes on both sides of the door so you could look in. And sure enough, he went into the governor's office. So I went back to where I had been. And about 10 minutes after 10, he came back and he says, "I have good news for you." He said, "The governor has stayed the execution for the space of 10 minutes so he can read your petition." But fortunately, the governor was well guided that morning, and he granted the petition, and we were eventually able to win a new trial for Whippler And in 1984, he was paroled. In 1988, he was released from parole. And when I went to see him, the first time I had a list of questions, perhaps many like you have now. He was on death row at Reedsville. At that time, the death row was in Reedsville, Georgia. And I walked over to his cell and I began to have a conversation with him. And during the conversation, my attention was distracted because I heard the chirping of a bird. So you don't expect to hear a bird on a death row on the 5th floor of a state prison, you know. And so I looked away and I saw this little bird in a cage, and the cage had been fashioned out of cigarette packages. You know, the Marlboro man was on death row. And Whipler apparently made a little swing for the bird. And the little bird was in there just swinging and whistling, seemed to be so happy, you know. And to me, that was just so out of place, so incongruent, that I never got back to asking any questions, you know, because it was just, you didn't expect to see a bird on death row, you know, a condemned man who's supporting another life and being. And, you know, that case, there's a reported decision about the case, and it did have statewide implications that changed the law in Georgia. At that time, a person who had been convicted of a crime could not raise in state habeas corpus, which is a method of reviewing a conviction after you've been convicted. You could not raise any constitutional issue except ineffective assistance of counsel, that is, that your lawyer was no good. And that was a very restrictive use of the writ of habeas corpus, because there may be other issues: discrimination, the composition of the trial and grand jury, coercion, illegal search and seizure, and things of that sort. None of those issues could be raised. And so the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that practice was unconstitutional, and Georgia had to change its procedures. And so there was legislation was passed that did change the procedure. So the procedure that they have now, today, that allows for post-conviction review of broader set of issues is traceable back to the Whipler case.
That's amazing. One of the other